So let us continue our discussion on theory of size exclusion chromatography. Uh, this is a graphical representation in order to demonstrate the theory of size exclusion chromatography. You can have many components in the y-axis, molecular weight, in the x-axis, the retention volume. This is going to give you the relationship between the volume of the eluent or volume of the mobile phase required to elute the solutes which are larger in size, which are smaller in size, and which are intermediately sized. So, as you understood by the theory, V naught is going to be VE for the elution of all those larger group of solutes because they are larger in size. The solutes which were larger in size, they were eluted first, and the volume of the mobile phase required to elute all those larger solutes will be exactly equal to V naught. And the volume of the solute required to elute all those small solutes will be exactly equal to V naught plus Vi. That is V naught to elute the larger solutes and Vi to elute the smallest solutes. So VR can also be written the retention volume or the elution volume required to elute all those smallest solutes will be summation of V naught and Vi. So this calibration curve will be giving you the explanation about the retention volume or the elution volume with respect to the volume of the mobile phase to elute the solutes which are larger in size, smaller in size, and intermediate in size. So you have two limits here, limit 1 and limit 2. The upper limit is called as exclusion limit and the lower limit is called as permeation limit. Exclusion limit and permeation limit. What is the meaning of this exclusion limit? This is the exclusion limit. You can see here there is a curvature and the curvature has been excluded and the straight lined portion has been considered and it was extrapolated in order to get a straight line, and the point of intersection was obtained, and this point of intersection is used to get the value of V naught. And at this particular point, this is expressed in terms of molecular weight, and this group of solutes with the molecular weight beyond this particular limit are very, very large. The group of solutes with the molecular weight beyond this, larger than this, are very, very large. They are excluded. They are excluded. So this particular limit is called as exclusion limit. So exclusion limit in the calibration curve simply defined as it is the limit for the molecular mass beyond which the solutes are going to be excluded by the packing material. Because of the larger size, they are going to be excluded. So they will elute rapid. They are eluted rapidly. They are moving fast. They are transmitting fast. Their traveling rate is greater. So they reach the detector rapidly. That volume of the eluent is denoted by V naught. This is the limit called as permeation limit. Permeation limit with respect to the molecular weight here. I'm explaining with respect to the molecular weight. So this has brought to the y-axis. So molecular weight. This is called as permeation limit. Means below the permeation limit means all those solutes which are having the molecular mass lesser than the permeation limit, they are going to penetrate easily into the pore maze. They are very, very small in size. They are very, very small in size. So exclusion limit is the limit of the molecular mass for the solute. The group of solutes which are having the molecular mass beyond the exclusion limit, they are excluded because they are larger in size. Permeation limit is the limit with respect to the molecular weight of the solute, below which all those solutes are going to be permeated through the pore maze very easily. Means these group of solutes which are having the lesser molecular weight than the permeation limit, their residence time is going to be larger. So they are going to reside in the chromatographic column for larger interval of time rather than this group of solutes which are eluting in between the exclusion limit and the permeation limit. So all other solutes between these two extremes, between the exclusion limit and the permeation limit, all these solutes will be having intermediate size. So one set of solutes which are larger size than the exclusion limit, they are eluted with a single band. All those intermediately sized solute which are having intermediate size when compared to the larger size solutes and lower size solutes, they are eluted with a single band. And all those smallest solutes which are having very lesser size than the intermediately sized solutes, they are eluted last as a single band. So this calibration curve is plotted by using logarithmic value of the molecular weight and the retention volume. So this calibration curve is very useful to express the exclusion limit and permeation limit. Okay, so let us come back to the calibration curve again. Let me use the calibration curve. As I defined, the exclusion limit is the molecular weight of the species beyond which retention occurs. The term retention is with respect to the mobile phase. All those large solutes are going to be retained by the mobile phase, so they are carried down the chromatographic column. So they are carried by the mobile phase. They are moving rapidly down the chromatographic column. So if a species having the molecular weight greater than the exclusion limit, they are very large. They are moving farther down the chromatographic column rapidly. So they are going to be the first group of solutes eluted first. And the permeation limit here, these are the group of solutes which are having the molecular weight below the permeation limit. Their penetration power into the pore maze is going to be very easy. So they will be eluted at last. In between these two extremes, first larger size solutes, then the smaller size solutes. In between, the intermediately sized solutes are going to be eluted. So this is the theoretical background in order to explain the elution profile in size exclusion chromatography. Of course, whatever the chromatographic technique, the separated solute must be detected, and for which we need a detector. The commonly used detectors in size exclusion chromatography are spectroscopic and refractive index detectors. Because there is no any condition for size exclusion chromatography for choosing the samples containing variety of the samples, solutes. Whatever the solute may be organic, solute may be polymeric, solute may possess low molecular mass, solute may possess higher molecular mass, whatever it is. All those group of solutes can be subjected for separation by this size exclusion chromatography. So whatever the organic compound eluted out of the chromatographic column, the organic compounds may be aromatic or aliphatic, whatever it is. If they are containing pi electrons, or if they are rich in conjugation, if they are having extended conjugation, definitely the spectroscopic detectors are going to be employed straight away in order to detect the property of the solute. Even the compound is not going to obey any absorption or transmission of light radiation, the mobile phase property can be used here. We can choose a mobile phase in such a way that is having the capability to absorb the light radiation, so that the transmitted light radiation can be measured with respect to the solute. So the difference in absorption in the presence of the solute and in the absence of the solute, we can make out to plot the chromatogram in order to show a peak for individual group of solutes. So spectroscopic detectors are used. Here you can use UV absorption detectors, IR absorption detectors, even X-ray detectors can also be used in size exclusion chromatography. And these refractive index detectors are also commonly used because this gel permeation chromatography or gel filtration chromatography under size exclusion chromatography is widely employed for the separation of polymeric materials. So gel filtration chromatography, GFC, is one of the widely used separation techniques for the separation of polymers. They are large molecular weight compounds, so their fractionation will become very easy between small polymers and bulk polymers. Based on the molecular masses, we can classify the polymers into simple polymers and bulk polymers. Simple polymers will be having lower molecular mass. They are formed by utilizing very less number of monomeric units, and the bulk polymers are going to be formed by utilizing a larger number of monomeric units. So the refractive index of any solute, or the refractive index of the effluent, is because of the solute present in that. You take a effluent which is coming out from the chromatographic column, its refractive index in the presence and the absence of the solute will be definitely varying. So the difference in refractive index is also an indicator in order to identify the solute. So we can compare the refractive index of the standard with the refractive index of the sample, and through which we can identify what is the solute present in the sample. So identification can be made very easily. And spectroscopic detectors advantage is for the quantification process. So based on the extent of absorption of the light radiation, we can quantify what is the amount of the solute present in the sample. It will become more prominent to quantify the solutes by using this spectroscopic detector. So let us move on to the application of this size exclusion chromatography, because it is applicable for the separation of the solutes based on their size. So size is dependent upon the molecular weight. So we can classify the compounds into simple molecules, bulk molecules, or polymers, or intermediate sized molecules based on their molecular weight. So the separation of high molecular weight compounds such as natural products from low molecular weight species and even salts can be performed by means of this size exclusion chromatography. It is very simple to say the applicability of this size exclusion chromatography for the separation of natural products or any other high molecular weight compounds from low molecular weight compounds and even intermediately sized molecular weight compounds, because these large molecular weight compounds will be having very less negligible penetration power into the pore maze. So they are going to be excluded. And we have spectroscopic detector or refractive index detector. They are capable to measure the property of the solute. They are solute property detectors. And even they can distinguish the property of the solute from the property of the mobile phase. So we can draw the attention of the solute. We can draw the attention or the nature of the solute in order to plot a chromatogram, detect a signal versus the retention volume or the time of elution. We can plot a graph, and by means of the chromatogram. We can have the relative positioning of the peak, and that can be compared with the standard, and we can make sure whether this natural product, such as cholesterol or prednisolone or hemoglobin, whatever it is, DNA fragments, whatever it is, whether it is present or absent, we can decide very easily. So natural products can be separated from low simple molecular mass compounds, and even salts can also be subjected for separation. And these salts will be having the functional groups such as carboxylic acid or sulfonic acid. In the presence of sodium, they will be converted into salts. And nucleic acid salts can also be subjected for separation by this size exclusion chromatography. And gel permeation chromatography, which is nothing but a non-aqueous chromatographic technique utilizing the principle of size exclusion, where non-polar solutes are going to be separated. A group of solutes may be homologues and oligomers, which will be non-polar in nature or intermediately polar in nature. They can be easily separated because their molecular weights are different. Homologues, simple molecules, simple monomeric units will be having simple molecular mass. Then the oligomers will be having larger molecular masses. So they can be easily distinguished. Their penetration power is distinguishable when they are traveling through the chromatographic column. So their separation will become possible. So homologues and oligomers can be separated by means of gel permeation chromatography, which will utilize a non-polar solvent. And these are non-polar in nature. This must be non-polar in nature. So these non-polar solutes are going to be separated under non-aqueous medium, where hydrophobic packing material is going to be employed. The pores of hydrophobic packing material will allow the homologues to stay for longer time than the oligomers. So oligomers are going to be eluted first, then homologues will be eluted. And the fractionation of proteins can be studied along with other water-soluble polymers, can also be subjected for separation by gel filtration chromatography. Here, the molecular fractionations are going to be happened based on the molecular masses. So, molecular mass is the ultimate factor here for successful separation of the solutes by size exclusion chromatography. So, proteins fractions, it is all dependent upon the molecular weight. Molecular weight is because number of amino acids present there. So different number of amino acids may be present in different fractions of proteins. So they are fractionated based on their molecular masses. So based on the molecular masses of the existing proteins present in the sample, their fractionation is also going to be done for separation. So gel filtration chromatography is one of the most suitable techniques for the separation of fractionation of proteins and other water soluble polymers. Particularly, this polymer industry will be utilizing this gel filtration chromatography for the separation of variety of the polymers, because one polymer's molecular weight will be definitely different from other polymers molecular weight. So they can be separated, they can be fractionated. And even molecular weight distribution can also be studied by means of the calibration curve, especially organic soluble polymers. What is the exclusion limit? What is the permeation limit for those polymers? We can study by gel permeation chromatography. We can prepare the calibration curve by means of the chromatograms. We are able to construct the calibration curve, and by means of the calibration curve, we will be capable of extracting the information about the molecular weight distribution. So what is the range of molecular weights of compounds present in the sample? We can study very easily. And even we can purify synthetic and biological polymers, say for example, proteins, polysaccharides, and nucleic acids. They are important group of compounds. Of course, they belongs to either a biological or synthetic class, but the proteins are made by chemical components, amino acids or enzymes. And polysaccharides, they are carbohydrates, maybe sugar, simple sugar or large sugar, whatever it is. Nucleic acids, peptides, whatever it is. Their classification will be solely dependent upon the molecular mass. So, because they are having different molecular masses, so they can be subjected for separation by size exclusion chromatographic technique. So its application is not excluded for any variety of the samples of any origin. It is applicable for the pharmaceutical origin. It will be applicable for the biological origin sample. It will be applicable for the natural origin, whatever it is. You take blood, plasma, serum, urine, saliva sample, whatever, any biological material you consider. The proteins present in blood, the proteins present in serum, plasma level concentration for any antibodies such as immunoglobulin G, antibody isotype, we can determine by means of this size exclusion chromatographic technique also. And if you go to polymer industry, a simple polymer can be distinguished very easily from the complex polymer based on the molecular weight, and that can be obtained from the chromatogram. If we have chromatogram, we can classify very easily what kind of substances are present by standard addition procedure. Or even we can prepare a calibration curve in order to quantify the solute, as I explained in the class. Application of chromatographic techniques. Chromatographic techniques are used for both the purpose, quantification as well as characterization process. So you can compare the positioning of the peak with a standard, and you can assume whether immunoglobulin M is present or not. The height of the chromatographic peak can be visualized in order to express the concentration of the immunoglobulin M, or the albumin, or the protein, or the enzyme, or whatever it is. So here you can have a specimen for chromatogram representation. The packing material used is polyhydroxymethyl agarose gel. Polyhydroxymethyl agar gel is used. Size exclusion chromatographic separation is done by means of 50 millimolar formic acid as a mobile phase. And the packing material with a particle size of 1000 angstrom unit, 100 nanometers. 100 nanometers or 1000 angstrom units. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K are the variety of the specimen compounds present in a sample. Immunoglobulin M, biological compound, alcohol dehydrogenase enzyme, antibody isotype, O-albumin, protein, carbonic anhydrase enzyme, ribonuclease enzyme, bovine insulin, biomolecule, LHRH biomolecule, encaphelinamide, a chemical compound, amino acid based compound, N-chloroacetyltrace, chemical compound, water. All these things are present in a biological material. You can take blood plasma or serum. If you just introduce the blood plasma or serum, these compounds are going to be fractionated. And if you use a refractive index detector or absorption detector, the detectors are capable of distinguishing these compounds. So immunoglobulin M, alcohol dehydrogenase, and C for immunoglobulin G, as similarly J you can say N-chloroacetyl tris. And you have negligible height for water because water is polar in nature, and its interaction with the polar material will be very high, and that's what it has been eluted at last, and the concentration cannot be expressed, so it is having negligible height for water. Okay, you can see here. So all these compounds are easily separated within 12 minutes. So approximately 16 minutes is going to be the analytical time. Within these 16 minutes, we are able to complete the separation. No other analytical technique is suitable for the separation of this immunoglobulin M, immunoglobulin G, O-albumin, carbonic anhydrase, and even N-chloroacetyl tris. No other suitable analytical techniques are available. Polyhydroxymethyl agarose gels are easily available in the market. They are cheaper, very, very cheap. And formic acid we can prepare in our laboratory very easily. There is no any complexity in conditioning the stationary phase. Homogenized packing material can be filled into the chromatographic column, and you can prepare a solution of the sample containing all these solutes in formic acid or even in water. Water can be used. So you just introduced at the end of the chromatographic column, you wash with 50 millimolar formic acid. So immunoglobulin MA is having less affinity towards the stationary phase, so its penetration is very less because of the molecular mass of 9 lakh Daltons. 9 lakh Daltons. So here 1.5 lakh Dalton is for alcohol dehydrogenase. So this is lesser in size when compared to immunoglobulin M. So immunoglobulin M is larger in size, so it is eluted fast. And this is having very lesser size, water, it is eluted at last. So you can see the fractionation of these biomolecules or even enzymes or proteins based on their molecular masses. So this fractionation will become very simple provided the stationary phase is most selective. So separation can be achieved. Again, the same stationary phase is used with a particle size of 60 angstroms, 6 nanometer. The dimension of the column is 200 by 9.4 millimeter, 20 centimeter length and 9.4 millimeter ID. Again, the mobile phase is 50 millimolar formic acid. 50 millimolar formic acid. So these are the components present, such as cytochrome, encaphelinamide, aspartame, phenylalanine, acetic acid, formic acid, water, etc. So you can see this is an amino acid MSH, alpha MSH. Molecular masses from 12,270, 1,665, 573 in Daltons. So 18 is the molecular mass of water. Formic acid is 46. So formic acid itself used as a mobile phase. It is also having a peak here. Mobile phase is having a peak here. Means it is also got some penetration power into this polyhydroxymethyl gel. Because the particle size is very less, 60 angstrom, the solute formic acid is penetrating efficiently into this polyhydroxymethyl agarose gel more comfortably. Therefore, it is also showing its penetration and hence it is eluted at last. So whenever the concentration of the formic acid in the column is more, it itself going to reach the detector. There is nothing wrong. So cytochrome with 12,000 Daltons going to be eluted first. Alpha MSH is going to interfere with the cytochrome. The degree of resolution is impaired here. There is no huge difference in molecular mass, 12,000 and 1,665. Of course, there is a difference in molecular mass, but there is a close proximity with respect to the penetration power. It may be polar interaction. It may be polar interaction. Due to the polar interaction of the solute, both A and B are eluted together. Co-elution is possible here. So we have to modify the chromatographic procedure in such a way that the resolution between A and B must be increased. So C, encaphelinamide is separated well. D, aspartame, similarly phenylalanine, acetic acid, they are separated well. Within 40 minutes, we are able to separate by using this size exclusion chromatographic technique. So this is how The size exclusion chromatographic technique can be employed for the separation of variety of the compounds. So to sum up, size exclusion chromatographic technique is a powerful tool for the separation of simple molecules to larger molecules based on the molecular size. So if you introduce a mixture of solutes which are containing solutes of smaller size, intermediate size and larger size, all those larger size they're excluded because they are larger in size. They don't have diffusibility into the pore maze of the packing material. Therefore, they are eluted rapidly. Their retention in the mobile phase is more. So mobile phase is going to carry the solute molecules out of the chromatographic column more rapidly. So they are the first group of solutes to be eluted. And similarly, the intermediate solutes, their penetration into the pore maze will be intermediate when compared to large size solutes and the smaller size solutes. Therefore, they are going to be the intermediate group of solutes to be eluted. And all those smaller solutes, their residence time will be larger because their diffusivity or the permeability or the penetration into the pore maze will be larger. So they will stay in the chromatographic column. They will stay inside the gel particle. They will stay in the maze of the pore, maze of the stationary phase for longer time. Therefore, they are eluted at last. They are eluted at last. So you can have limits, exclusion limit and permeation limit. Exclusion limit is the limit with respect to the molecular weight of the solute beyond which the molecular exclusion going to be taken place. And the permeation limit is the limit with respect to the molecular weight below which the penetration of the solute molecules will become very comfortable because of their lesser in size. In between the exclusion limit and the permeation limit with respect to the molecular weight, those molecules are considered as intermediately sized molecular solutes. Therefore, they are going to be eluted in between these two extremes. And we have also discussed about the theory of size exclusion chromatography. In order to understand the volume, elution volume required to elute the larger solutes and smaller solutes, we have expressed in VE, the elution volume. VE will be equal to V naught for the elution of all those larger solutes, where V naught is the volume of the mobile phase that could be occupied outside the gel inside the chromatographic column. And Vi is nothing but the volume of the space available inside the gel particle, and V is the elution volume. V is the elution volume. So V will be equal to V naught for larger size solutes. VE will be equal to Vi plus V naught for lesser size solutes, and K will be equal to V minus V naught divided by Vi, and this will be used to express the elution volume for intermediately sized solutes. And ultimately, we can have the expression of K is equal to Cs divided by Cm. This is going to give you the equilibrium constant expression, and in which the equilibrium constant is simply called as partition coefficient for the separation of solutes. Cs is the concentration of the solutes which are penetrated into the pore maze, and Cm is the concentration of the solute which have been retained by the mobile phase without any residence in the stationary phase particle. So if K is equal to 0, V will be equal to V naught, means the partition coefficient will be 0 for all those large size solutes. If K is equal to 0 means the partition coefficient will be 0, means the solute particles which are very, very large in nature. If K is greater than 0, then that is going to be the partition coefficient of all those smaller solutes. In between 0 and this K is greater than 0, the partition coefficient of intermediate solutes will be existing. So this is how the partition theory can be explained to obey the principle of size exclusion chromatographic technique. And the detectors which we will use in size exclusion chromatography are mainly spectroscopic detectors and refractive index detectors, because variety of the organic molecules or bioorganic molecules can be separated in size exclusion chromatographic technique. Definitely they will be possessing aromatic property or some degree of conjugation. These conjugated molecules will have the capability to absorb the light radiation of UV region or visible region. Therefore, UV spectroscopic detector will be used to study the absorption of light radiation by the solute molecules. And if there are many macromolecules are going to be separated, the refractive index of the effluent coming out from the chromatographic column is due to the solute with the low molecular mass or the solute with the large molecular mass to exhibit lower refractive index or higher refractive index. Therefore, the refractive index detectors will also be widely employed in size exclusion chromatography. And even yeah, spectroscopic detector can also be used because many organic molecules are air active because of their non-linearity. They possess dipole moment, the molecular stretching, wagging, bending, scissoring, all these molecular vibrations, modes of vibrations are going to be happen. So the stretching frequencies are very prevalent to understand. These stretching frequencies can be utilized to decide whether this group of compounds are present based on the functional groups these stretching frequencies are derived. So this is about the detectors and applications we have studied. Size exclusion chromatographic technique under GFC, which is used for the separation of polar molecules, under GPC, which is used for the separation of non-polar solutes, and particularly the homologues and oligomers can be separated in GPC, gel permeation chromatography. And nucleotides, proteins, DNA fragments, protein fragments can also be separated, especially biomolecules can be easily separated by means of the size exclusion chromatography. And most commonly, the polymer industry will be employing this size exclusion chromatographic technique for the separation process, because polymers will be exhibiting molecular masses ranged from lower to higher values. So we can fractionate what kind of polymer present by means of the calibration curve. So fractionation of the biomolecules or the fractionation of organic polymers, simple polymers or macropolymers, whatever it is. So they can be subjected for separation by size exclusion chromatography. And I have put many chromatograms in order to demonstrate the applicability of the size exclusion chromatography for the separation of the solutes present in biological materials, as well as even natural samples or pharmaceutical samples.